Okay, let's get started. I lost my faith, and all I got was this podcast. Second episode.
We're back.
All right.
We're here.
I'm here with George, Winifred, Alexander.
The third, the seventh.
The third, the seventh, the 15th. The therapist.
The therapist.
And I am Micah Herrera, the creator, musician, performer.
Multi-hyphenated.
There it is. And just adamant, anti-theist, atheist even, who also just really is passionate about unpackaging and understanding religion and religion's hold on this country, the religion that I grew up in, and kind of what it did to me, and what was taught to me. Understanding all that is such a journey. It's so like it's so hard to rationalize, I think, is one thing that I said last week. So what do you think? Like, has that been hard for you to rationalize too?
The experience of losing faith and just understanding like what that means, or the experience, or
what I mean specifically is the faith that you believed, that you believed was true. Because I think that's one of the things that I am so passionate about is truth and finding truth, and understanding what can be proven to be true.
Right. Yeah.
And faith is, the Christian faith that I grew up in was so based on fantasy.
Right.
And fiction that it is very difficult for my brain to rationalize now how it was taught to me that way,
right?
How it ended up being believed that way, the things that they still believe,
right?
It's it feels very irrational. It feels, and so I've tried to understand it better. I think there's reasons why it gets that way,
right? Yeah,
but. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, I definitely think about that. I don't find myself thinking about that as much, okay. I think. I definitely think of the psychology of it a lot. Like, why are these ideas that I do find like irrational, right? Like, there are aspects of the Joseph Smith story, like going like to Mormonism, that like, obviously I think about, I'm like, that doesn't, really now wild. That I've looked at it, it doesn't make sense to me. But I do think a lot about like, why is the idea of, I don't know what the word would be, religion and the grandiosity that comes with it, the not spirituality, that's not the word, the fantasy almost, right? Yeah. Like, why is that something that people latch on to and feel a benefit from? Like, why are they drawn to religion? That really interests me. And I think like for myself, my own journey out of religion, like I think, and I don't want this to sound like I'm trying to like separate or say that I'm better than people that leave Mormonism because of like anti-material about like Joseph Smith. I just want to say like that's completely valid. Like, learning of those things is a completely valid reason to lose your faith. Yeah. That wasn't my journey, right? Yeah. My journey was more like just like about like, I really just, my worldview didn't match with it. And then I didn't really dive into like the Joseph Smith story and like all like the irrationality of it until my wife was going through, like Haley was going through it. And like, she was listening. There's a couple things called like the CES letter and letter to my wife. It's like these two different like works that have been put together.
These are Mormon, pro-Mormon document. No, okay.
Not the church would label them anti-Mormon.
Okay,
but it's a rational look at Mormon history. And laid out in a way that we were not presented.
A historical look.
Yes. Yeah. That's what it is. And I remember she was reading it and I was fixing the bathroom sink as a man does.
Oh, right on.
Right? Just
right on.
Unscrewing the PVC pipe, all the good stuff.
All right, good old traditional male roles. Yep. All right, we love that.
And she was in the living room and she was listening. I can't remember what part. She was listening to some aspect of it because she had like an audio version she listened to that was going through, I think, like something about the Book of Mormon and like parts of it that just don't historically make sense. Like, they don't work like with the way it's written.
Yeah.
And I just like popped my head out and I was like, "What do you think?" And she just goes, "It's all fake."
There you go.
I think a couple weeks later, we weren't wearing our garments, and that was kind of like one of those last steps. So,
oh my God, we didn't talk about garments. We're gonna have to talk about garments.
We'll come. We've got a lot to talk about.
You know, that's a juicy one. Everybody wants to know about the garments.
Yeah.
Even though it's been talked about before, but
Right.
I think I can't get enough of like figuring out what all of this weirdness is, this kookiness is. It's just there's so much. And for me is very different. For me, growing up, I developed this aversion to wanting to be manipulated or sold a story that's not true.
Yeah.
Or live in a world of fantasy that is basically not helping me.
Yeah.
That is from the outside looking in, like you're just a child playing in a sandbox. I want to be a part. I've always wanted to be a part of the bigger story of what's happening in the world and what's happening with our existence. The big questions have always been big to me. I don't know why, but from the beginning, I've always had the very big questions on my mind.
Yeah.
Where did we come from? Why are we here? What does it mean? What is purpose? What is truth? What is reality? All these things have always been on my mind. I don't know why. It's just always been a part of who I am. And I remember being a kid asking my dad those questions. And as a parent, you can't answer all those questions if you don't know.
Right.
There's a lot of, well, God has all the answers, so ask God, pray about it. That was a big thing.
Okay.
There's always
from
that
your parents.
Yeah.
Which, before we go farther, I think like just to put a note, we are going to be talking about your story today. I think it's a great time to get into it.
Right? Let's get into it.
I think we should like just really.
This is Micah's story.
This is Micah's story, right?
We did George's last time, so now we're going to get into kind of where I come from,
right?
How I got here.
Yes.
Maybe even give a little more credential to why I'm here. I think it'll kind of reveal some of those things too.
For sure.
Because it can appear like I'm here because this is something that's such a huge part of my life.
Absolutely.
And has been, and I feel very versed on.
Yeah.
I feel very adequate to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you were a presence in like my own deconstruction of religion, right? Like it's a journey I had like taken some steps on, but you were definitely somebody that was a guru in that area, not like intentionally, like you took me aside and were like, let me help you through this, pal. But you did, like you were definitely like, you're definitely somebody that, I admire, like in the way that you look at things, the way that you attempt to understand things, which I think again is why we're both here.
Yeah.
Like just like continuing that strain. I'm really excited to talk because I think there is such like a not vast, but there is a difference between like our experiences of
absolutely.
Like how we experienced religion, the things that drew us to it, the things that we took from it, and like the way we deconstructed it and look at it, of course, because of all those things.
Yeah.
I think that's influenced by like who we are as people, where we were raised, the types of religions we were in. Yeah. And I think the big difference for me that I see like up front, and we've talked about it, just like for me, it was very much like I've labeled it as like a frog in a boiling water scenario, right? Where it's just kind of the way it was, built up. I'm like, I don't really like this. And then I was like kind of dealing with that for a lot of the time. But you had like a really strong fervor and a strong like love for it.
I was bought in.
That you found that I'm really excited to learn more about and hear like your experience. And so let's go back to what you were saying.
All right.
Those big questions.
I've just had those big questions. I'll get to that. Let's go ahead. I guess I can start where we started with yours and kind of my familial background with religion. So unlike yours, where you have a family history of Mormonism and there's kind of this culture that is built up for me, my family were religious rogues.
Okay.
My mother's side was traditionally, she kind of went along with the family thing, which was being a Nazarene or a Baptist, which is a very dry version of Christianity. It's very it's got a well-established dogma. It's kind of vanilla to say. Just okay. Jesus was meek and mild, and and we go in this world and we be good to our neighbor, and God's gonna. If we're good, we're gonna go to heaven.
Okay.
Those type of things.
And is worship very mild and like even mannered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
That sounds like...
yeah. The music is very mild and very, it's just kind of there. Everybody, there might be a few emotional renditions on that piano.
Right. You
where
may start hitting
singing,
the keys.
Glory, glory, hallelujah, and then you get that march going, and then everybody's getting really riled up for some reason. Like, but emotion is generally tamped down.
Yeah.
There's kind of this staleness to it, but and then on my dad's side, he grew up Catholic, was very much did not like the Catholic Church. I think because he would have to correct me on this if I hope he's all right with me saying it like this, but he went to Catholic school as a kid, hated nuns because they were mean and disciplining, and he got his hands racked with rulers and stuff like that, and he had a few choice things to say about nuns as I grew up. And that was very funny. Maybe he'll let me tell one of his jokes about it later. It's a little bit distasteful, but it's funny. But yeah, no, so he kind of became a religious rogue. And then when he met my stepmom...
And by religious rogue, do you mean like trying out different churches, jumping to different churches?
Yeah, so basically he became a Protestant.
Okay.
So, which was a big deal. My grandmother, it was a big deal to her, because anyone in the family that was not Catholic is a very thing in the Catholic Church. Like, the Catholics are going to heaven, other people are not.
Okay, yeah.
And so he would get letters in the mail from the diocese or whatever, from the church. Come back home, come back to God, come back to the Catholic Church. There's still time. You don't have to be an apostate, those type of things. His mother would, help them send those, that type of stuff. So it was a big deal. And, which I appreciate with my dad. My dad always had this very much individual, I'm going to find my way attitude about him, which I am very grateful to have learned from him. And it has served me in a lot of ways. I've had to learn other ways of being, but being able to stand out on your own and go, I'm going to do this for myself, and I'm going to do this because I believe this is right, not because everybody else tells me so, is really powerful to be taught as a kid.
Right.
And so I'm thankful to him for that, and the way he operated his life in that way. And when he married my stepmom, I think that's when he found the Evangelical Church, because she took him to the Evangelical Church, and he really connected with it. He really loved, and they really connected with it. They really loved.
Were you around yet? Well, yeah.
So I was 2. I was 2 years old at this time. My dad divorced my mom at 2.
Okay.
Then married my stepmom very quickly after that, and that's a whole thing. But but they found the Evangelical Church, and this was kind of the start of where I really, this is where my religious indoctrination and involvement really got intense.
That's the environment you grew up in.
As the Evangelical Church there. And that Evangelical Church is a very powerful, emotional church. So especially for a kid, if you're raised in it, and you're taught that, because you don't have a reasoning brain yet, your prefrontal cortex is not developed yet, so you are basically emotion. So of course you are going to really connect with high emotion,
100%
religion. And so that was powerful. I mean, the music was moving. My dad really loved gospel music. Oh, I still do. I mean, it's really good. It's just really good music. Some of the, especially like black gospel, not like, the Gaithers were good, and like the kind of the white Southern gospel music was okay. But there were some musicians, there was some music. Kirk Franklin was a big one that we listened to all the time growing up. CeCe Winans, all those. They were just amazing, and amazing musicians, amazing music. It really developed my love for music.
Right.
Was through that, and but also the church. It was connected to the church. It was connected to Jesus. It was connected to the evangelical teachings. We grew up in the church that Kenneth Copeland, if you know who Kenneth Copeland is. He was that televangelist who recently has become a meme of being like having the face of a demon.
Right.
He's one of those televangelists that was word of faith, that, God wants to make you wealthy and prosperous in the world, and all you have to do is ask for it and God will give it to you. That was word of faith. Him and Jerry Savelle and other ones like that.
And with the evangelical church, I apologize, you're going to have to educate me slightly, right?
Yeah.
So it's these big pastors, right? These TV evangelists.
Yes.
So Kenneth Copeland, is he a TV evangelist?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the biggest in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like for you, like Sunday worship, was it at a church like that, or is like a church drawing from that energy and like similar, like,
so in the veins in the world. So
Okay.
the church that I went to is the church that Kenneth Copeland came out of before he started his ministry, and Jerry Savelle and some of the other faith leaders.
And is it a collection of churches, or it's like one church?
It's one church, one pastor.
Yeah.
He had kind of birthed this thing of this word of faith, this evangelical movement even, and they considered him their pastor.
Okay.
So Pastor
and this is
Nichols,
in Texas.
This is in Texas. And by the time I came to that church, it wasn't like a big church.
Okay.
Those big preachers had moved on and created their own ministries and churches and all their money and stuff. This church was the local church that they came out of, right? So I was in that church.
Right.
And was taught those teachings, which the pastor himself, Pastor Nichols, was not particularly, fiery. He was a little bit mild himself, but that world, even our church, everyone in our church knew Kenneth Copeland's teachings, knew the Word of Faith teaching, knew the televangelist preachers, knew the big ones, and idolized them. And it's very much a cult of personality, very much a charismatic movement, very much demagoguery. That again, emotional, right? They could get up there and speak and make you feel something, and that was God. That was God's power behind them, because they were charismatic speakers and charismatic people and have this personality.
Okay.
And so that's what I grew up around. And I remember being a kid in church, and the music just got me so much. I loved it. I was so involved when worship was my favorite thing. The music was my favorite thing. I just love singing. And even as a kid, you're taught that you can dance to music. You can move. There's also weird things. Of course, there's always making yourself prostrate during worship, which is a thing. Lifting up your hands, or bowing down.
What is the word? What is prostrate? What's that?
Like prostrate, like bent, like in a position of submission.
Okay.
That would be what that is.
Okay.
So
you're just like feeling the energy so much.
Yeah. Okay. So it really teaches you this first of all, submissive energy.
Right.
This give up control, give up autonomy. And not only that, but it's tied with emotions.
Right.
It's tied with powerful emotions. It's tied with this message that God has everything taken care of. You're just a child. Again, a child playing in a sandbox.
Right.
You're just
also like an altered state to a degree, right?
Oh,
very much like getting you into
a different altered state. The music was a big part of that. There were there's lighting that changes. There's big rousing music. There's emotional music, and we know this. I know this as a musician. I know this as a performer. That music is very powerful to change your mental state. It's very, I consider it to sorcery. I equate it to sorcery. That's a magical term that I don't mean literally, but it is a way of altering the state of people's minds.
For sure.
And we know that when we listen to music, when we hear powerful things, musically, it alters us. It changes the way we feel. And so that was very much used. There were long 30, 40, 50 minutes, sometimes an hour long of worship, of repeating these choruses of devotion. And it's almost hypnotic. There's a lot of hypnotic states that happen. There's a lot of very close your eyes and I don't know how to say it. Repeat these mantras until you feel it, until you feel it in your body.
It's like there's this like river of energy or like spirituality or the spirit that's there, and you just need to do the work to tune into it in that moment, right? Like we're here, we've got it, we're all in it. Like come on in.
Yeah, there's a big focus on God's presence entering the building. Right. There's a big focus on God's presence being here, and God's presence was here when everybody got real riled up and in a hypnotic state and in it, and in this kind of like really weird, if you've been in crowd, you see it.
And big crowd that you're in, the church you're in? Like,
yeah. I mean, it would depend, but it would feel big, especially as a kid. I mean, it could be 100 to 200 people, but that still feels like a lot of people.
And seeing the adults around you getting into that.
And they do.
The modeling and for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there many like rituals, or is it a lot of like time spent in like that worship, like energy space?
Right.
Like, my experience is very ritual, right? Baptism. That was like what it's about.
Yeah, I do know the rituals because of the Nazarene and Baptist side, my family. Which again is it's got a lot of history. But this evangelical movement was a new movement that was happening in America in like the 70s, the 80s. It kind of died down in the 90s. But it was a big part, the televangelists were a big part of the Christian Nationalist Coalition, the Christian coalition that the televangelists put together, Pat Robertson, was it Jimmy? I forget his name. I think it's Jimmy Stewart or Jimmy. I forget his last name. But these guys, they were big in even directing political policy, like creating this. It was like this whole movement, but it wasn't. It wasn't based on any traditional dogma. It was actually about kicking that. It was this whole, we're just going to read the Bible and believe everything that's in it. And everything else, these traditions, that's all the, what Jesus talked about, how the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they had all these rules. Yeah. And Jesus was here to kick all those rules and all this formality out of the way. And we're just going to have a relationship with God and Jesus, right? This is not a relationship with religion or church or ideals. This is a relationship with a living God and a person that you could get to know. So really your way of going about that was just whoever had the most charismatic and powerful way of getting to that state, right? That feeling that God was with you, that God was in you, that Jesus was talking to you, that Jesus was there for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you would feel it. You would get the goosebumps on you, you get the rush down your body. This was the church that believed in getting filled with the Holy Spirit. So basically you're possessed by the Spirit of God. And
speaking in tongues?
Speaking in tongues was a part of it. Falling out in the Spirit. This is where used traditionally, it's like a pastor with the power of God, lays hands on you and you'd fall out and pass out because the Spirit of God was so powerful, right? There was Rodney Howard Brown was this guy whose whole ministry was that as he went around the churches, the Holy Spirit would follow him and make people break out in these fits of laughter. And so like in all these meetings, and I don't know where it started because I wasn't there at the beginning of his ministry, but I saw he came to our church and like I'd been to a few meetings, like people would just start breaking out in this hysterical laughter and that would be the sign that God was there. And like then the whole place would be breaking out in hysterical laughter and like crazy stuff like that. There were like, we would have people, what they call, there are people who make fun of this church movement who talk about like people rolling down the aisles and stuff like that, but it was real. It was basically like a big conga line at some point. And as a kid, you're seeing this.
Yeah, what was that like?
At first you think like, this is a little weird and a little wild, but then you're like, how interesting. Like
right. I mean,
these these, and as a kid, you don't really have any boundaries to what is real or what is like silly. Right. As a matter of fact, as a kid, you are silly. So you're kind of like, all right, I can get into this.
Of course I'm going to roll down an aisle.
Of course I want to do a conga line, you know? Right. Of course I want to do the conga line singing the song. Like, that's so much fun as a kid. Like, what? Are you kidding? Getting really into worship and jumping around and spinning and doing, of course, as a kid, you're like, yeah, I get permission to be goofy. Of course. Right. Like, let's do it.
And was like every meeting like that? Like it would get to that
They would try
energy?
to. Yeah, it would try to. It would depend on the Sunday. It would depend on the week and the congregation and the reaction. And, but it would be an attempt to get to that place every week. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that was kind of a barometer for success for a Sunday service was, can we get all the emotional whatever out? I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure people then start coming, right, with like pent up energy that they're wanting to express. They're wanting to like get catharsis in some way from that. Yeah.
And it attracts those people.
100%,
yeah. And I will say that is part of the reason that I loved it.
Yeah.
Is because I kind of needed that catharsis. I needed that emotional catharsis. And we can get into that based on my home life, but like there was a need for an emotional outlet. There was a need for my emotions to be validated and not repressed, and to be told that it's okay. You know, it's okay to feel. You can feel openly in a space and not feel like you're intruding on the space. Your emotions can be put out there, and you're not, and it's not offensive.
Right.
It's not offensive to the world you're around, because I kind of grew up. There was just my parents divorced when I was 2. So I'll go back to my home life there. So there's a little bit about the church, but I'll go back to my home life. My home life, my parents divorced when I was 2. My dad remarried immediately and has been married to the same woman since, which I commend him for. And I think that their love is a good example of lasting togetherness. They have been in sync ever since, and that is really good. I don't think you could ask for more. And they have loved their family more than anything else, even more than God, which I at times found surprising and also found very reassuring, and I'm very thankful for. So I was when my parents split up, I was living with my mom, me and my brother. And my mom had 2 kids. It was me and my brother, and she was by herself. And so, you know, a single mom energy, but also there was a lot of emotional turmoil between my parents. There was a lot of, and I hope they forgive me for putting this out there, but I feel like it needs to be put out there. It needs to be said just because people just need to hear it. But there's, you know, we talked about this, but there was a lot of emotional manipulation of us as kids, weaponizing against the other parent. There was a lot of, if you love them, then you hate me energy. And there was a lot of, my emotional state is what matters, not yours. And so there was a lot of feeling like I had to protect the emotional state of my parents. So my own emotional state was never really given a lot of thought. But that continued on, especially as more kids got into the mix, like in my mom's 3rd marriage, which was her most stable and most long-lasting. With my stepdad, he brought in 2 kids as well, and I was the oldest. And from then on, it was my job to basically take care of myself.
Okay.
I set my own bedtime.
How old?
This was 12 when he came in. And we had a little bit of a rough coming together just because me and my brother had been with my single mom for a long time. And it was kind of wild. It was kind of wild because my mom was not very good with discipline or putting guardrails on. He kind of did. He created a little bit of a safer environment for me to feel safe. So, and I'll go back to that in a second. But from then on, it was me. As soon as I could get a car, it was you're taking your brothers and sisters to all their things.
Yeah.
When my sister was born, my youngest sister was born when I was 12. She's my half sister. It was basically me helping raise her.
Right.
And yeah, and then by the time I was 18, it was like I was doing just about everything for myself. This was like so when I got into youth group in my teens, that's when I really started to raise myself and then, find my own mentors, find my own ways of living.
And that was through the church
Through
initially?
The church, yes. So before I get there, my home life before that was very tumultuous. It felt dangerous at times. I think I've told you this story. Like there was, I don't know if I need to tell it. I don't know. I mean,
it's up to you.
Maybe it helps. I don't know I don't know what helps or what not. We need the focus to be on religion. I know we need the focus to be on religion, but there were just very tumultuous times. They felt dangerous at times. And it didn't feel safe as a kid. So there was definitely this safety that I felt in the church. There's this validation that I felt in the church. There was this emotional outlet that I felt in the church. There was this, you're loved.
Being taken care of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was huge. I needed that. Right. I needed that so bad. Yeah. And so by the time, maybe I'll tell more stories later as we go on to other topics. Maybe that'll help. Those stories will help later, but go ahead.
I don't want to over psychoanalyze.
That's what you're here to do. That's what you're here to do, George. Come on.
Just even that idea, like you said earlier, of like what the evangelical movement was almost built around is like, there's this God we can have a relationship with, right? And that you like could like be taken care of in a way that like you had like a say in as well, right? Like, or like that's how they framed it, or like how it was framed, maybe that idea of like a personal relationship that you can like lock into,
that you're a part of,
right? That you're a part of.
Now, God decides everything.
Right, for sure.
God tells you, and there's the whole idea is that you empty yourself out and you become Jesus.
Yeah.
Or you become the perfect son for God or the perfect child for God.
Yeah.
So the individualism is not there.
Right.
The autonomy is not there, but it is very much this emotional message of Daddy God.
Right.
And even they've used those words like daddy. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Daddy, Father God, like a child saying, Daddy, please, I need help, or Daddy, take care of me.
Okay, so it was very much framed that way.
It's this infantilization of people's emotional state, to say, and people who are emotionally vulnerable kind of need that.
Yeah,
they kind of need someone to go, it's going to be okay.
You need to be held, right?
Yeah.
Right? You need like an energy to hold you to feel that you're going to be okay.
Yes.
That's what it's offering.
Yes, which was something that I just was not getting at home, and it was more like I felt like I was part of my responsibility was to hold like my mom, and to be like she needed the emotional holding, she needed the emotional parenting.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Mom, if you're hearing this, and this is a lot.
Hey, I just need
to tell my story. Yeah. Oh God,
sure.
I love her. I love her more than anything. And she's done so much for me and would do anything for me. And I love her unconditionally, and I know she loves me unconditionally. So I want to say that.
Yes. But your experience is valid too. Like it is.
Yeah,
it's your story, it's your experience of it. And I know it's hard to separate it from like being a comment on the people that are involved in that.
Yeah.
But I think like that's important to do. To try.
I feel like it's important for people to hear
so
that they understand and can relate to it. Because I know that there's other people who have gone through the same thing.
100%, yeah.
And I know that there's other people who can understand that. That if people are able to understand their own selves better, it helps.
Yes.
You can help. You can traverse the world a whole lot more healthily.
Right.
And so I needed to understand those things.
Yeah.
But by the time I was 12, 13, I was in youth group, and that's when I really, really got in. I mean,
and this whole time you'd been like going to the church just like when you're with your dad mostly, or
well, I had been, yes. On the Sundays I was with my mom, so this was every other Sunday I would be with my dad in church, and Sundays that I was with my mom, we would go to whatever, the Nazarene or Baptist church.
Okay,
and it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah.
But I was definitely being radicalized at my dad's church.
Right. Okay.
I was being radicalized that this is like, we've got to go and share this message with the whole world.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
you're going to be a soldier for
You're
Jesus.
proselyting,
And you're very special. God has chosen you to carry on his mission.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I got to youth group, the youth pastor, who was also the worship pastor, I'd already been introduced to, already knew who I was, knew I was a pretty radically and at least interested kid.
Right.
And he definitely latched on to me in my fervor, and I latched on to the acceptance that I felt. Like I felt like, again, emotional outlet, emotional acceptance as a person. And I think we were.
You said mentor before too. It sounds like that was like part of it, right?
Oh yeah. And I'll get to that too. So this was my early teen years. So my early teen years, he really hadn't become a mentor yet. But as soon as I think I was 13, and we were at a youth event, and he was driving everyone home in the van, and I was singing a song, that he had on the radio, and he was like, "Oh, you have a pretty decent voice. You should come and sing for, have you ever thought about singing for the worship band?" And I thought, "Oh my God, yes. Are you kidding? Like I can be involved." And that really started my journey, because music was such a huge part of my life. Already, my mom was a band director. My dad was a piano player.
Oh, okay.
So my mom started me on clarinet when I was 8 years old. And
I still need to hear you play the clarinet.
You want to hear me clarin?
Clarin.
There's I got a burn, and it's the clarin, baby. Yes. No, that was fun. That was fun. But when I started on guitar and piano, those were powerful. Singing was such a huge thing for me. So cathartic. As a matter of fact, to this day, if there's a day that I don't sing, I feel like part of me is shut off. Part of me is shut down. So I love that. I love singing. I've always loved it. It's always been such a spiritual thing for me. And he got me up there and got me started singing and learning music, and I got more involved with the youth group, and he kind of took me under his wing and helped me get involved with leadership with the youth group and with the church. And I really just kind of took off from there. I really got involved. I really started taking on leadership positions. I think I was able to deliver what people wanted out of worship, which is what I wanted out of worship. I wanted a connection, an emotional connection with a God. And I didn't realize that it was just a good emotional connection with, music and community and all these things. But I was really good at it. I was good at bringing the emotion out, because it's what I needed. I needed it for catharsis. And so I helped other people get catharsis through that. And people really started to see God through what I was doing in the church. And that's the thing that I talk about with sorcery, is like, these people are looking at you when you're standing up in front of them. And, pretty soon I was standing in front of the whole church doing this. They want to see God through you. They're trying to experience God through what you're doing. And I knew how to deliver that. I knew how to deliver that emotion, that powerful spirituality, because I believed it, because I was behind it, because I was fully bought in. And by my teen years, I was reading my Bible every day. I was praying every day, and I was going with this person. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't know if I should say names. I'll bleep it out. I was going with this person, my youth pastor, to events. We were going to conferences together. And this is a big part of the story too, and I need to get into this. I was spending a lot of alone time with him. And he really, really kind of latched on to me, and I latched on to him. And he, to me, became a father figure in my life. Now, I have a great father, but a mentor, you know what I mean? Yeah. A mentor, like a full-time mentor, like someone who's helping you come along. There was, yes, he latched on to me, I latched on to him. I was going with him to religious conferences, religious meetings. I was riding in him with him in his car. I was with him multiple days of the week, sometimes 5-6 days out of the week. I was with him.
Okay, yeah.
Besides going to school and doing my other stuff, I was with him. And my parents, with the other kids, again, this is where I was raising myself. My parents had 5 kids to take care of.
Yeah. And he was giving you all his attention.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So I was taking care of myself and doing my thing, and by the time I got a vehicle, I was able to go out with that. So, but yeah, he would let me, before I had a vehicle, he would let me drive his car home from the church, meeting that we went to, just me and him. He would buy me meals and gifts, and he would pay for everything. He would take me along, whatever I needed. He was there. So this was a lot. This was a lot. And I was very thankful for a lot of it. I think I was thankful for that someone saw something in me, wanted to invest in me. That was really powerful. I'm thankful for that. And so I got so involved when he left that church and went to this other church. I went with him and became even more involved in leadership and really became a core part of this new church.
Okay. And is it very much like same structure, same energy, just a different like place you're going to?
Yeah,
like when it comes to like him moving to another, it's just like a new opportunity for him?
There was some political things that happened. The pastor of the church, that he was just really old at this point and had stepped down, and the new pastor came in. There was conflict that was happening among all this. It's political.
Okay.
And so we went to go help his brother-in-law start a church. Was part of his family, the youth pastor.
Okay.
And build up a church.
Got it.
And this is where at this point, I had already made the decision my life was going to be doing music ministry for God. I was going to live my life playing music on stages and helping people get this really powerful connection with God and
share what you were feeling.
Yeah, and there was this thing growing in the world, in the Christian community and in the world at the moment. I mean, there was this whole swell of Christian music, and Christian worship music was making a really powerful presence in the world because it was taking on modern music styles.
Okay.
And then also mixing that with, so it was cool. It was cool.
Yeah.
It was also
edgy.
Really emotional. It was a little bit edgy, like as far as like how far it went with this devotion to God was edgy. Because it really went there. It was like, I will give my whole life. I'll give up everything. I will be fully devoted. I believe everything. This is the moment for God to really make his play in the world that through me was going to, through whoever was going to make this powerful presence of God come down, and we were going to see signs and miracles, and we were going to see revival, and everybody was going to believe and see the power of God, and just see all these powerful things happen.
Yeah.
And I was swept up in that. A lot of people were. I have a lot of friends. I have friends now who were also a part of that movement, who are looking back like, whoa, we look back, we're like, dang, we kind of got swept up in that. We did.
Yeah. It sounds exciting.
It was exciting.
I mean? It sounds very exciting.
It was very exciting. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
It felt so important. It was the most important thing I could do with my life, right? Was to give my life to serving God, the creator of the universe, the one who cared about me, who had endowed me with his powers, with his superpowers. The Holy Spirit was in me, and I could go out and I could speak things and they would happen, and my hands could perform miracles if I had enough of the power of God. If I were so in tune with God, we could watch God do things through me. So, and I believed it. Oh my goodness. Oh, I was going to bring down. Maybe I should bring them down. I have 2 prophecies that pastors that were big parts of my life had given me, and they're pasted
about
in
you?
the Bible. Yeah,
like,
about me.
Really?
About me.
So, that's something that they would do.
Yeah. So this really fed into how special I felt like my life was going to be in the church. I have them written down there.
So they wouldn't do this for everyone. It was like,
no.
Special chosen
So there
few.
is like, in this evangelical church, there's prophecies that happen.
Okay.
And pastors would come in and prophesy over certain people. They would feel the Spirit lead them to certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of times I was picked out and really, they said some things that were really powerful. Really, you're going to do great things for God. God has chosen you. You're someone who's going to, at one point, one of them said, you're going to be a leader in your generation for God. That's really big.
Yeah.
But to say you're going to lead a whole generation for God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the?
Did it come with a caveat, like, if you did the right things at all?
No.
Okay.
It was very much. Maybe I can read them to you, but because they're translated. Maybe we'll do it another time.
Mormons, we have patriarchal blessings. I don't know if we've talked about that.
Okay, so is this a type of prophecy type thing?
Right, it's more, again, like Mormonism is very ritualistic.
Yeah.
And so it's more of a ritual, right? Okay. So it happens for everyone. It's less like chosen few.
Yeah.
But it's very much like here's like a little map to your life. You get it when you're like in your teen years usually. And it's very similar energy. They say different things, but it'll a lot of time be like you'll be like a great leader in your church or whatever it is. For a lot of women, it'll talk about the children they'll have. For a lot of men, it'll talk about the missions they'll serve.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like if you do the right things, right?
Yeah.
If you stay faithful, you'll have all this opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe we'll do a prophecy.
Maybe we
episode.
can. Maybe we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was pointed out because I kind of had the signs of my star was rising in the church.
Yeah, I mean, you're very. I've seen you work a crowd.
Yeah, it is. And that's what it was.
You got it.
And they could see that. They could see that.
Yeah.
They saw that I knew how to do those things, that I was smart, that I was talented.
That you were interested.
And I was very interested. I was very interested. So they were, and there is this thing in that evangelical church to find those people and go to claim them.
Yes.
So that they can claim them when it gets big. Justin Bieber.
They're investing in you.
Justin Bieber is a clear sign of that, targeted by the church. Celebrities, they're targeted by the church because they want to claim these powerful people for the church, right? Not to say that I am some powerful force in the world, but they could see the potential for that.
For sure,
right?
Yeah, they're hedging their bets.
Yes, they could see the potential for that. And my youth pastor did. He did. Okay. And so anyways, that was involved. I was getting more involved. I was becoming a leader in the church. I saw adults looking to me to spiritually lead them at 17, 18, 19, 20. And I'm over here, I get, trying to give them a word from God, trying to lead them to God. I didn't know anything, I was just a kid, but I thought I did. I thought God was speaking through me because that's what you're taught is like God can speak through you no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, God can speak a powerful thing through you.
Yeah. Did you feel very like self-assured at the time? Do you remember?
There were, yeah. And I think it was part of the culture. For sure. Too. It was a part of the culture. I was kind of taught to do that. And I was also self-assured because I was seeing God work through me. I was seeing what I was doing was powerful.
Right. I think that's baked into, I know in like when I was telling my story, I talked a lot about like my like uncertainty and waving, but I do think like the period of my life where I at least tried to feel the most self-assured was right after like Haley and I had gotten married. I'm 21. I'd served a mission. I was doing the shit. Like I did the stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I reflect on that time and I'm like, that's like the time that probably I'm not the most pleased with myself. But I felt the most self-assured.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, now I've done processing. I feel like I'm in a good space. But it's just interesting.
At least a better
right,
one.
Right,
yes. No, definitely.
Yeah, but like that, like, just like you're in that self-assured space. So then of course, they want you to be. And you felt that.
Yeah, definitely. I did. And it was because I was so, and I was self-assured because I was spending all my time doing
Right.
this.
You were in it.
I was in it. I was watching preachers preach, trying to learn. I was reading my Bible, trying to learn. I was praying. I was getting myself into these states of long states of prayer and trying to enter this state of the power of God. And I was fully devoted. I fully meant what I was doing. And I fully believed it. I think the only times that I felt like a little weird about it, and this is something that I want to say, like, because we're probably in like the 16, 17, 18 ages. And I remember I was doing, when I started to do stuff for my school, I started a prayer group in the mornings at my school.
Okay.
And
you're at public school?
Public school. And I just remember people having comments about it. And I was like, oh, is this
really? Okay.
I grew up in a pretty homogenous town. Everybody at least was a Christian, an atheist. And so it was a suburban town in Texas, Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Everybody at least knew.
Right.
What the culture was. But even then, it was a little weird to some people.
Okay.
That you would go into a room and pray every morning before church for like 30 minutes in this type of like almost...
Before school.
Yeah, before school.
Yeah.
We had a classroom that we would go in and we would just all be praying, each one's in a part of the room. We're all just speaking out prayers or meditating or whatever. This was weird to people that you would do this. And I thought, okay. And then I remember we did for my senior year, they have they have a service that's like kind of a religious service for the seniors. It's a traditional thing, and I don't even remember what it's called. Okay. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like this whole like service that they'll have in the school. And I don't even know how common it is, but if you go back to my hometown, they would know exactly the name of it and what it is. Yeah. But anyways, I led the worship for that. Okay. And I remember my classmates looking at me a little weird too.
Was that not usually the way it went, like having a student lead that? Or?
Oh no, it was student led. It was student led. So students would go up there and pray or give a benediction and then, worship and stuff like that. And I just remember leading it and people were just looking at me kind of weird. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Those were my first introductions to like the kind of like how niche what I grew up in was.
Yeah, okay.
Because I would say this, and I do want to say this, I call it a religious cult.
Yeah.
And we'll get into why and all the reasons, because we can go down the list of all the reasons, and they were very strong.
Yeah.
It was very strong. I mean, I was very swept up in it, and I can't wait for us to get into kind of the talks about what it does to you mentally, like how your own prison guard against outside ideas, the way that they guard information, and filter things and censor things and make sure that you never really get educated on the wider world and those type of things. It's wild.
How things are externalized.
And it's very enclosed community. People outside of this community are the people that are needing God, if not filled with the devil. So you're taught never to really trust or listen to people outside of the community.
Oh yeah, us first, them, right?
Oh well, or they're soon gonna get it. We just have to bring them in and indoctrinate them. Yeah, we have to bring them in and indoctrinate them. Yes.
Yeah.
Once they see the power of God, then they'll get right.
And
they'll understand. Yeah, and they all will. Yes. So, those were my introductions to like kind of the kookery,
that's when you started
niche that I was in, how cultish it was and how radical it was. And so anyways, and I was involved, I kept being involved. We were growing a youth group, my youth pastor and I, and we were making mistakes and trying to lead an organization. We were growing it, and really started to tumble when he told me at 18 years old, and I feel like I need to say these things in this podcast because I just don't know what to say, like how to get these out there, people understand what happens and what can happen.
Right. And I think it's your experience too. Like it's I know what you're gonna share, and you've told it to me. Yeah. But I do think like it's up to you what you want to share too. Like I don't think you have to share everything for sure.
Sure. And I don't know how important these things are, but maybe we can get into it in another episode, maybe a little more deeply.
Yeah.
But we had an emotional upheaval, him and I. And I think you can surmise what happened when I turned 18. And it was when I turned 18. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's when this happened, is when when it's above board. Mm-hmm. And so there was just this emotional upheaval. And that was the first time I really thought, oh, there's some dark stuff in this church, in like Christian religion and the way it's organized and the way it's set up, its power structure.
Okay, yeah.
I really started to question things at that moment. Okay. At least I had a glimpse of everything's not exactly what it seems.
Right, like this facade, or like this perfect, what you had been raised up as a kid in.
Yeah, because it had been getting more emotionally involved, more intimate, meaning, emotionally and things like that. I don't want
your relationship with him or
that,
with the church,
and that tied with the church and with religion, and because I know even if this person were listening to this, they're not the reason I left, but it definitely was maybe you should think about what you are believing and what you're getting yourself involved in.
Yeah, it had you look at it in a different way.
Yes, it at least revealed to me maybe there's a perspective that I'm missing here. And that's when I started to really, this is the thing we have to talk about too. I am a gay man. I started to realize this after I was 18. Before that, I really didn't even understand what it was. I had emotional connections and attractions to men, but I never really understood them, never really had the words or the vernacular or the tools to understand it.
I'm sure there's very little sex education.
Oh, very little of that, and especially in the church that I grew up in, that's not even an option. That's not even an option. Yeah, yeah, of course. Of course it's not. Mm-hmm. That is sinful. That is a choice that people make. And it's because they're filled with the devil. And I couldn't be that because I was not filled with the devil. I was filled with God.
Did you feel that like, oh, I can't even go there? Or was it?
Oh, it was definitely, I can't go there. Okay. It was definitely, I couldn't even give a thought towards that.
You couldn't even consider
conceive of it. I couldn't conceive of it in my mind. Yeah.
Those connections you're experiencing.
That I could be gay. Yeah. No, I mean, I was going to marry a woman, and I had this ideal woman that we were going to serve God together and do these powerful things.
Yeah.
And I even had women that I was attracted to. What I later realized was I wanted to be more like them than be with them, and not in a way like I wanted to be a female, but these were powerful women in the church who were doing things that I wanted to do. Worship leaders who had accomplished great things musically and songwriting and were powerful leaders, and I was attracted to that. Just like I was the males that were doing the same thing. I just didn't give it the same credence. I was like, oh, well, this must mean I'm attracted to women. Okay. I was attracted to the males too that were powerful in the same way. I just didn't count it the same.
Right. Like this one doesn't count.
Right.
Yeah, because you weren't given the space to. You weren't provided any like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was not. What I realized later is I was not sexually attracted to these women. But yeah. So I started to realize that when I was 18, and that's another part of my story. We don't have to go into all that, like how that started and everything, but I did. And We can get deeper into that later.
Okay.
That part I know we don't really have to get into today. Like as far as like what happened in my early teenage years, I just know that like for me the being like being attracted to men, or like, you know, as when you're young and like you're like masturbating and you're thinking about men or something. I mean, or you're not thinking about anything. It depends. But I just remember, yeah, you're just hormonal. But
Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, sometimes it just happens. But you're being an animal, right? You're again, your prefrontal cortex, especially for men, is not developed at that point. So I didn't even give a thought to what was happening during that. I just knew it felt good and whatever. I was just going along with it, right? It was not in my head that I was gay.
Okay.
But I fully had crushes on guys. And it was just weird. It was this weird thing that, you know, you don't even know how to process it because I don't think your brain is able to at that point, especially with the upbringing that I had.
Right.
And without the tools to do it. I had no tools. And anyways, that led to me also forcing to have to look at what I really believed.
Okay.
And so
at this around this 18.
So this so around 18 is when I said it to myself in the mirror. That's when I said, "Oh my goodness, you're gay." Like you have to say this to yourself if you're going to be honest with yourself. Like it was the realization, it was the revelation had come to me at 18. And so then I was like, now what do I do? Like, how do I deal with this? This is something that I'm going to, because I still believed everything that I believed.
Yeah.
I believed that I was going to do everything I was supposed to do. Right. But now I was going to have to deal with this. And I mean, you know, I did what every kid does. Even at 16, I was still praying this way and I didn't even realize it. But at 18, I really did.
To pray it away. Like for God to take
it away
from you.
You know, yeah. So early on in my teenage years, I could avoid it and be like, oh, I know God's going to like fix whatever weird thing is happening sexually with me. Like, obviously, that's going to be fixed by the time we have to confront that. And then by the time I was 18, there was no avoiding it anymore. It was just not avoiding it anymore. I was in love.
Yeah.
I was in love with a man. And not the youth pastor. But I was in love with a man. And it was the most real and beautiful and spiritual, God filled thing that I had, you know, to use the religious language that I'd ever experienced.
Was he also evangelical?
He was raised in the same church I was, or similar circle. Yeah. It was a sister church, you know.
Right.
That's how I met him.
Right.
And like I said, we can talk about that story. Yeah. We met when we were 13. We kind of grew up together. There's a whole story there. You know, but we really didn't confront being gay or being in love with each other until we were 18. And then it was real. I mean, it was very real. And I knew I could not deny that I was in love with this person, that this person was meant more to me than anything else. And so I was like, I can't feel that way and deny who I am. That's not going to be compatible. So I had to figure that out. So this was the beginning of real strong dichotomy in my brain of a real cognitive dissonance would be the good word for that. Phrase for that.
I can't imagine like being told that you're going to be like this special person, right? And really having that desire to do that. Yeah. And then just feeling this like very like authentic person, like part of yourself, like coming into your awareness. Yes. And those things just not being able to come together, or not feeling like there's a space in the church for that, right? And
it was the beginning of me realizing how toxic religion is and how damaging it is mentally. Yeah. Because immediately because I did tell my youth pastor at the time about this, and this was partly I don't know. I mean, it's just what I thought I should do.
About doubting?
No, that I was gay. That I'm attracted to men.
Yeah.
And his guidance was very mentally and emotionally damaging. Because, it was basically, no, you're not. This is just a cross to bear, just something that you're going to work through. And, if you just stay pure and don't give in to that, God will take care of it, which is very, very not healthy. No. Extremely. And this is a part that I really want to get to. And, maybe we can get more in depth when we get to a lot of the sexual repression that the church does.
Yes. Similar attitudes. And
yeah. So when me and this person that I was in love with started having sex, of course I would feel extremely guilty. I didn't know what to feel about it because it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever been a part of. It was the most loving thing I'd ever been a part of. Yeah. We cared so much for each other. I mean, this was making love, like making a love with each other. And part of that was the sex, part of it, we were making life, we were making a home, we were making a life together. We were a part of each other's lives. We had grown up together. Like I said, we met when we were 13, and from there, and I'll tell that story more later, but there was so much involvement in our development with each other that we were intertwined. And this person was an extension of me, and I was an extension of this person. And to say that was wrong or not, or that it was sin, that it was, the fact that we wanted everything for each other, wanted to give each other everything, wanted to be there for each other for everything, wanted to love, wanted to just have this pure of a love as we could for each other, a love that I had needed my whole life, that I had wanted. I wanted someone to care for and someone to care for me. And to tell me that's wrong, and then to feel that, that shame, to feel that self-hatred, that self-damaging, something's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. I have done something so wrong. I have soiled all of this thing that I'm supposed to be, this responsibility that I'm supposed to have, because I felt this responsibility. Like I'm supposed to be leading people to God. I'm supposed to be leading at least part of my generation to heaven and to glory and to truth. What I considered truth, what I was told was truth.
Right.
And it was such a cognitive dissonance. And I began to feel this really darkness come over me. And
did you feel like disconnected from yourself? Like, do you remember feeling that at all?
That didn't come till later.
Okay.
I really didn't come till later. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I particularly felt that.
Yeah.
I think I didn't know how to feel.
Yeah.
I think I was still, again, not able to completely reason what was happening.
For sure.
I can talk about it now.
Yeah, no, I'm
very effectively, very reasonably. Back then, if you had asked me to talk about that, I wouldn't have even known. I would have just stared at you.
Yeah, you're 18, like going through all that.
That's 19, 20, and then into 19, 20. Mm-hmm. So. And this was when we had really developed a relationship. We had started to make a home together. And I was still very involved in the church.
You were going to school, or what did you?
I went to university for a year. This was another thing that I went to university, but was told by this, my mentor, youth pastor, that, don't go too far. You need to stay close to home if you're going to go to college at all. Because of course there's this, I think we were talking about this earlier before we started, there's this very strong anti-intellectualism.
Me going to grad school is the worst thing that could have happened, I think.
This very anti-education, anti-intellectualism. God gives you all the, and this was the church I was raised in. This was the ideas that I was raised in, that the Bible has all the answers. You don't need to read any other book but the Bible. Not a single other book. You don't need to go to anyone else for answers except for God.
Yeah.
Asinine. I mean, absolutely crazy. Just and damaging. Again, so damaging to being able to navigate reality and navigate the world that we live in and navigate this craziness of the universe that we find ourselves in. And I get it. It can all be so overwhelming that some people want simplicity and want to be told, I don't need to seek any answers. I don't need to seek any hard truths. I don't need to face any hard truths. I can just live in this fantasy world, the sandbox, and play in the sandbox and just die, eventually die. And I don't really have to understand any of it because I can live comfortably enough, not ever having to know actual answers.
Yeah.
And
did you feel, because you said that earlier, that sorry to derail.
No, go ahead.
We'll get back.
Please.
But you did say earlier that you had always had like big questions.
Yeah.
Did you feel like those were getting answered? Like, was that getting answered? Were you finding like, because I know like it was very emotional church, right? A very emotional space.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that back around. Yeah. So this was another part. So after university, I went to university for a year. But because I was so involved with my church and because I was so pressured to be involved with my church and church things, I could not give enough time to academics. So I ended up leaving that and going to what's called a Bible school.
Yeah.
It was an Evangelical Christian church school, basically, which had brought out a bunch of those leaders in music and pastoring in our circles that were very powerful. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go where they went because that sounds cool. I quickly realized how simple and anti-intellectual that world is, because this was supposed to be a university experience.
Okay. Is it like a public college?
Well, so they had accreditation programs. So if you went through certain programs and went through long enough, you could get accredited with this Baptist college that was associated.
Okay.
But for the most part, it really wasn't. It was really only valuable in the church world. Okay. And I just remember sitting through those lectures thinking, oh, this is not actual, this is not this is not truth. This is not, because I'd been raised in public school, so I at least knew what some hard truths were. I wasn't even taught evolution in public school because of because
we glazed over.
My town was it was so religious that they weren't even allowed to teach evolution, which is crazy. Yeah. I mean, they taught it, but the teacher kind of like
they pepper over
it because all the parents will get in an uproar if you actually go into it. Yeah.
The kids are going to come home with some questions.
Yeah. So you have to say like, oh yeah. So, but people believe other things too.
Some people say that there are dinosaur bones that have been here for millions of years. Some people say that somebody put them from another planet.
Yeah. For us, and this was so there were some really interesting things that were said in this college about to
are they teaching out of the Bible?
They're trying to teach the truths, those type of scientific truths through a biblical lens.
Okay.
So there was an explanation that God can create the earth with age. So
what do you mean by that?
So like writing a book, like if you write the first chapter, it can already have all this history behind it, but it's still the first chapter, right? So God can bring something into existence that has the appearance of already 6 billion years of age.
Oh.
Yes. So it was very good sidestepping. I mean, I was like, okay, all right.
I think he's onto something, guys.
Yeah. And then there's like this whole like firmament thing about to explain Noah's flood, and we can get into those.
Oh yeah. What does a day really mean in Genesis?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And trying to give us, they believe that there actually was a worldwide flood and that there was this firmament of water that crashed down and.
Mormonism waffles on that, especially in recent years. They've tried to distance themselves from.
Well, because it's absolute,
it becomes harder and harder.
Yeah,
as
it's just kookery. It's just absolutely not true.
But we definitely, I think
right.
I think when I was growing up with the church, they were starting to kind of just at least like quail that language a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was kind of presented like this is a fun story for kids. But I think at that time they still believed it. Now they kind of give themselves some wiggle room.
Okay, well, good for them. Good for them, or at least for like, I mean, that's the thing. And that is the thing we need to talk about that the church does is when it comes to an unavoidable truth, they just kind of adapt to it. They just kind of have to start accepting it and adapt to it.
Yeah.
Or they get more fanatical and they just try and lock down more on people's minds, which is kind of what, because there are a lot of churches and denominations that are like more like, okay, yeah, evolution is pretty real. We have to accept that.
Yeah.
But God is behind evolution.
Right.
And those type of things. Yeah. There's always God. God is God of the gaps, right? God is further back there, controlling it all, manipulating it all as we find more truths. Maybe it wasn't, the earth is not 6,000 years old. Maybe evolution happened, but God is the orchestrator of all that to bring us to this point.
Oh,
there's all of that.
Yeah.
But my church did not, and my church still does not. My church that I came from vehemently denied all of this. And that was another thing that like really brought me around. I was like, you guys.
Got harder and harder.
It's harder and harder to play in the sandbox like a little child.
Yeah.
Because that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I look back on it now and I see what they're doing now and like what's happening, it's still the same. It's still children playing in a sandbox.
Yeah.
And
so you go
it's
to
kind of
the
sad to
college.
look at. It's kind of sad to look at because it's just like I had to grow up and be a part of like real world and face real world, face the real world that's out there and face the real reality that's out there. And it's just so interesting that people are still going, no, we can't look out the window.
Yeah.
We just have to stay inside and just stay inside and don't think about it. Don't look at it.
Yeah.
It's wild to me. It's absolutely wild. Again, this is hard to rationalize. It's hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
But I was to your point, I was so much into the big questions.
Yes.
And once I started to see that they really couldn't answer those, that there was this lack of undergirth of intellectualism and intelligence in what was being said and sold, that I just really I was like, this is not, because I was getting old enough now where I could be like, I need more than this, guys. My brain needs more than this.
Right.
Like, I'm not a child anymore. It's not going to entertain me anymore. And
reading a book from hundreds, thousands, whenever it's actually from, and like saying like, this is how we have to like view the world now.
Forever.
And
don't read any other books.
It's definitely a hard sell for me.
It's a hard sell. It's so hard, such a hard sell. But for me, I was so sheltered.
Yeah.
But I was starting to be forced out into the outer world, through realizing that I was gay, through, I started to travel a little bit with my partner. My partner was also, really coming out of that and was really ahead of me with all that. And I'm thankful to him for that because he really helped me too. Because, definitely one of the smartest people I've ever known, and very in a lot of ways that I was, I have my strengths, but his were opposite, and one of those ways was actually understanding data and understanding reality and being able to put together reality in a systematic way. It was just something I had to learn. I think I'm very good at it now. But I was an artist, everything was fantasy. Everything was magic to me. That was the way my brain just developed, and I loved it. I loved that fantasy world. I still do. That's what I bring through with my art.
Yes.
But I had to learn an engineering mind of how to structure reality and how to really make things work in reality.
Yeah.
There's this thing in the church, the phrase I always grew up with. We don't know how electricity works, but when we flip that switch, the light comes on. That's the way God is. We don't know we don't know how everything works behind God, but we know that it's real. And I was like, but you can learn how electricity works.
Oh, for sure.
And how to flip your own light, how to make your own light switch.
Yeah.
We know that now.
Mm-hmm.
and like, how do you think you have light? How do you think you have light? And like,
that's so funny. It reminds me when I was on my mission. I think I've told you this before.
Okay, tell me. Tell me.
No,
go ahead.
When I would teach people like the word of wisdom, which is like the Mormon church, like code of what you can eat and drink, and no coffee, no alcohol, no smoking.
Yeah,
I'd be like, I don't know why we can't drink coffee.
Yeah,
but it's an opportunity to obey God.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like
I don't need to know why.
I don't need to know why.
I really did. No. I was just saying it. I feel bad. I don't love that. But.
I love that. I love that it's coffee. And that is another way of like, because if you brought that to my church, they'd be like, oh, that's crazy. That's wild. Coffee. Coffee's great. Well, like God,
Yeah.
But it points out just how silly, the things that my church believed they're just as silly.
Yeah,
they're just as silly. They're just through a different
yeah.
lens. Yeah, they're just as silly, just through a different lens. And so I went. I remember the turning point. There was a really strong turning point. It was a really strong turning point. It was one day, because at the end of our classes for this Bible college, we would have the whole school assembly. And I remember this was when Prop 8 was happening in California here. Okay. And for people who don't know, this was gay marriage for California before President Obama and that administration had made it legal for everyone in the country in 2013. Yeah. It had started in 2008. By this time, it was like 2010, 2011. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was like that time. And there was a movement to overturn Prop 8, to overturn gay marriage in California.
Right.
By the conservatives and Republicans in California, which there are a lot of when you get outside of the city. I mean, like any state, outside of the city, the rural areas.
For sure.
But anyways, I remember they brought up this video, and it was a bunch of celebrities, and Jack Black was leading it. Hilarious guy. You know Jack Black, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. He was leading it. There's a whole cast of celebrities, and they were basically mocking. It was like the stage play of Jesus and the Ark and Noah and all these biblical characters. And they were just making this complete mockery of Christians trying to control who people could marry.
Right.
And it was an absolute dunk on how ridiculous Christians were being about this.
Right.
And I remember the dean of our school getting up there and saying, before he showed the video, he said, this is what's going to be the downfall of America and our world. And I just remember hearing that. And I thought, because this school was one of the ones that was telling us, had the ideas that people were suffering in the world, like people were really suffering in the world, and that God could be an answer, right? God could help people. And I just thought, there are so many people starving. There are so many women suffering, children suffering. There are so many people who just have so many problems, can't even get clean drinking water. And you're telling me that two consenting adults who get married is going to be the downfall of civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just thought, this can't be right. None of this can be right. This is not it.
Yeah.
And also just the credential of almost anyone that I knew that was a leader in this religion was just going down and down and down at this point. And after this, I was still trying to do this whole, I think that I can lead a different type of Christianity, a new age Christianity that is not so caught up in all this dogma and weird shit.
Because they're still so important to you, right?
Yeah, I still believed it. And I was like, you're taught this too, is like, and this is what's so narcissistic about the religion I grew up in, is you're taught that you have a direct line to God, and that God in your head, which is just your brain talking to you, literally just your brain talking to you, is the real God.
Yeah.
And so there's this inherent narcissism that comes with it. There's this because there's no dogma guardrails, it's really just the most charismatic ideas that you can get everyone else to believe in their head. They'll say that that's God.
Yeah.
And so, I began to see that. I began to see through that in the people around me, the leaders in the church, my mentor, the ones who had, the ones who I had held in high regard. I began to see that, oh no, they're really just obeying the God in their head. They're obeying the person, the ideal that they think is the ideal. And then I was like, well, I can say that now. And so I kind of got caught up in that. And I was like, well, the ideal that I see in my head has to be the real God. Let me try and make that work.
Yeah.
And it really unraveled from there. I left the church that I was in because of the emotional turmoil that my mentor was going through, because I had basically was not giving into any of that. And, so that just like ruined our relationship.
Giving into like the anti-gay, like,
oh no, what he wanted, what he wanted. And so I left there, and then I was just kind of hopping around some other churches that I trusted and stuff like that. And we'll talk about some things that happened along the way too, when we get into some of those things. Specifically the sexual repression episode, I think that'll be really telling for a lot of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll get more into details. It just really started to go downhill from there. And then I moved. I was working for a ministry. And actually got another mentor with a woman who I hold in high regard today still. Right. Love her to death. She's an extraordinary woman and really gave me so many tools to live my life, because she saw that I was someone, that was gonna try and do something with my life. And she really helped me. She really taught me how to help myself and to go after the things that I believed in, and go after my dreams. That's her whole message, is go after your dreams, live your dreams. So I was really thankful for that time, but that was a time in, and then I moved to go after my dreams. I wanted to move to California. I'd wanted to move to California for a long time, and I don't know why. I just felt this, like, I knew that the music industry was in California.
Means you're drawn to fantasy.
I was drawn to fantasy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I knew that the film industry was in California, and I knew it was a fantasy land.
Right.
Beautiful.
Opportunity
dreams. That's where people were, and I was like, I want to go. I want to see what this is about. I want to be in LA. And I moved out. Into this cabin, just me and my dog. And I was just alone for a long time. It was very beautiful. I will never forget it for my whole life. It was a gorgeous time of my life, because I just had this time of self-reflection, introversion, coming to terms with being gay, coming to terms with not having shame about that.
Yeah.
Wondering, is this what I really believe? Like, really doing a deep dive into what religion, what did the Bible actually say all through it? Like, what was it actually saying? And then I started, and then I said, you know what? If I'm really going to believe this, because I was like, I was at an inflection point. I was like, you're going to have to either go your whole life believing this and believe it strongly, or not.
Yeah.
And it was like when I had the revelation of gay, I was like, you're going to have to look in that mirror and say you're gay, or deny yourself and deny who you are. And I got to that point, and I said, you know what? I'm going to read and listen to the people who are defending what I believe, and people who are opposing what I believe. And I had never done that.
Right.
You would never
be taught to.
I had grown up being told that anyone who tries to convince you not to believe what you believe is filled with the devil. Block them out. Don't even listen to them. The devil will seduce you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which happened.
Well,
but that's the thing. That's the thing that's so sinister about it, is because it's so sinister, because it's the idea that you are weak. Your mind is weak. You have no control. You can't trust yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
You have no autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
You are a pawn in a game of spiritual juggernauts. You better stay over here where it's safe. Anyone, and it's abusive. That is a thing that abusers do.
Absolutely.
By the way, we'll get into that. It's an abusive psychological control.
Right. It's there are so many different aspects of Christianity that are just these built-in self-perpetuating machines.
Yes.
Right. Of just this aspect of it has allowed it to continue for as long as it has, and unfortunately, I believe will continue to allow it to. Right.
Yes.
For sure. I'm excited to dive deeper into that, but it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, we were texting a little bit this week about the doctrines of everyone's so important, souls are so important, but men are so evil, and we're all innately evil, and so we have to overcome that. And so it just allows you to silo out when I'm good, or when I feel good, it's because of the church. When I feel bad, it's because of me, and because of my natural nature. And you have to disconnect those things. So then it's hard to then turn and be okay, it's time to learn for myself and to trust it. It is hard.
Yes.
Which I think
you're not even taught how to teach yourself or how to learn. How to learn new things.
No.
You're actually discouraged from learning new things. Self-investment is selfish.
Right.
That's how I was taught growing up.
Unless it's going to build the kingdom of God.
Well, even then. No, not what I was taught.
Okay.
What I was taught was you give everything that you have, and God will give you what you need in return.
Yeah.
So, self-investment of any kind was seen as selfish. And so I was really,
okay.
And what this does is this keeps you at a very simple level intellectually.
Yeah.
It keeps you at a really easily, just easily manipulated, easily controlled levels intellectually. And then also directs all that energy into the collective or the person who is leading the whole thing, who's controlling the whole thing, the charismatic leaders who are controlling the whole thing and taking from it. And there's some that are good. I would never say that the pastor that that churches that I grew up in, they were good people. They were good people, and they
there's
mean
a lot
to
of
do good.
Right.
They're well-meaning.
There are well-intentioned people within this system.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
are operating within these. Yeah, that you said,
but some of those juggernauts that they idolize and that the church that I grew up in idolized are absolutely corrupt and evil people. Yeah. It's absolutely very true. And I've seen the inner workings. I got him. I got involved with people who were involved in the inner workings of that. And I worked for that ministry, and I saw just how barren and not about it was about money. It was about money.
Yeah.
That's what it was about.
It's all become about money. Yeah.
Of course, that's what it's about. Of course, it's about money.
But your research, going back to looking at the opposite sides of the argument.
So I was up there in this cabin, just me and my dog. I was living this fancy life. Oh my goodness, it was so amazing. I would just go on walks in this mountain area, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, I'm in California, and I had this place that was my own. It's my first time living alone.
Wow.
And oh my goodness, it was just so glorious. It was a cute little cottage cabin. I mean, talk about a gay boy's fantasy, having a cottage cabin, and you're cooking your own meals in your little oven. You got your little muffins.
Exploring your identity, yourself.
Yeah. You're just it was a dream. It was such a dream.
I've never read Eat, Pray, Love, but it kind of feels like that. But
it was my version of that. Yeah, it was my version of that, I guess, But it was just very much my fantasy. I'm a cottagecore gay boy, very, soft book reader. I've always been an artist, but I love homey feels, It's a very thing. That was very much a thing for me.
Yeah.
So, and I learned a lot of that from my previous partner who I was talking about, who was a book reader and an introvert, extreme introvert, and just very homey and knew how to make a home. And so I was very into those things. Those things were very attractive to me.
Yeah.
And so to live out that, and then to live my artist, my own creation of it was very beautiful. I loved it. I loved living that fantasy. Anyways, but I was reading books, that were defending God. And I remember I got to this one we talked about last time, The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins.
Right.
And, oh my God, I got 5 pages in. That's how long it took, George. 5 pages. And I just had this sick feeling in my stomach. But it wasn't just a sick feeling in my stomach. It was like immediately replaced with this overwhelming relief and joy.
Okay, I was going to ask that. I was really curious about
like
that. When it switched.
It started really, I mean, it was 5 pages. So how long did it take? You know,
Right.
because I was feeling queasy. I was like, oh no. And I had this urge to do what I had been taught to do. Shut it off, close the book. Don't look. But I was like, you know what? No, you've got to do this. You have to do this. And I did, and it was done. It was done.
Yeah.
It was done. I was like, oh my God. I've been believing not only a fantasy, but a child's fantasy my whole life. And it was done. It was done for me. I was like, oh, that was it. There was the process of deconstruction, which I know we wanted to talk about more.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do this for the third podcast.
Right.
We can each talk about our deconstruction, how we got to now.
Right.
Because mine's a little bit longer than yours.
Right.
So that happened in like 2013 and it's 2024 now. So it's been like 11 years since I have not believed
been unpacking and
I've been unpacking,
rebuilding.
Yeah. So I mean, I've had a lot of time for that. I mean, that's a lot of time for, you know, like, because it was years of really, I was listening to, you know, still like, I was like, I had to double check, you know, I had to make sure. I was making sure for almost like 7-8 years. I was making sure I was going back and I was listening to all the great preachers and listening to I was listening to the great thinkers in religion and like double checking, you know, I was listening. And then I gained a lot from that too, because I really figured out you get a really strong understanding that, it just bolsters how not just
how
real it is.
How the messaging was progressing.
And it bolsters when you learn the history of the church, when you learn the history of your part of religion, even your little sect of religion, of even where your church comes from, or you start learning about, you know, people who defend the faith and people who try to defend it intellectually, people who try to defend it emotionally, you know, all that stuff. It just it really bolsters the atheism, or at least the not this God, not this religion,
right? What you all
and then you start going
about.
through the other religions, and then you're like, oh, they're pretty similar. They're pretty much the kind of the same origins, kind of the same process. So, and then I was out, and I really had to begin my journey. And really, what was really devastating was my whole world was built around the church, was around religion. Not only like just like I was going to church, this was going to be my life. I had no other outside world skills except for what was useful in the church, which was being a musician and a singer, being good with graphics and video, you know, the multimedia is big in the church. And that's though I had those skills and I was using them to like pay my bills. But even then, I was now having to compete in a much larger world, because the church is kind of like a neutered version of the skills that you need in the outside world when it comes to multimedia, because you can sell a lot of stuff in the church, because like, you know, the bar's not as high. Mm-hmm. It's gotten higher lately, but the bar's just not as high, you know, for the real world. When people go into a movie theater, they're expecting more than what the church production can do. Right. You know, that's why you have church movies or like Christian movies that are just terrible. Absolutely terrible. The production writing, you know, value, the script writing, the acting, all of it. It's absolutely terrible, you know. But so I had those skills within the church, but, you know, and then I had really strong ability to lead people emotionally and spiritually. But that, you know, what am I going to do? Just go talk to people outside in the outside world, you know? And some people can do that. Yeah. Or some people go into what we're doing right now is talking about religion and talking about the experience. But I didn't do that at the time. You know, I needed to grow and everything, and I needed to develop myself. So I just felt like, oh no, I'm starting over again. But I had already done it. Like when I made the decision to go to leave the church that I was in,
and then to go to California,
both of those felt like I had built up this whole castle and this whole community around me, and all of it had to be bulldozed. I mean, all my safety, all of my community, everything that I, you know, Because as soon as I left that church, those relationships left.
Right.
It was done.
Yeah.
It was done.
People you'd known since
my
you
mentor,
were a kid,
the people that were, kind of kept in touch, but it was done. And now, completely done.
Yeah.
And
was there like when you ultimately like decided, and I know you were still like checking in, was there a moment of like telling your family or like telling, you know what I mean? Or was that kind of along the way?
Yeah, that was along the way.
Okay.
My family relationships were, interesting along that time, I kind of did this journey alone. You got to remember, again, I was raising myself from right. Like practically, my parents were obviously good parents. They provided for me. They kept a roof over my head, kept me fed, those type of things. But I was very individualistic. So I needed to figure some of these things out before I told them. And also, they weren't particularly asking. They just wanted to know that I was okay and that I was alive. And so I was going through all of this turmoil and everything, but they weren't really along for the ride much.
Yeah.
Telling them I was gay was a whole thing.
Okay.
Coming out was a whole thing, but by then I think they kind of understood a little more where I was, what was happening. And then eventually my parents know I'm an atheist now, or definitely don't believe in the Christian religion, but that was a big deal too.
Okay.
And, each of my parents have different ways of coping with that, processing that. My dad says, well, we believe that you were saved once, you're going to be saved forever, that type of thing. You're going to be in heaven with us no matter what. Okay. All right, cool. I don't mind if he believes that. That's great. Fine.
Yeah.
Great, Dad. of course I want to go to heaven with you. Of course.
Sure.
Like we're going to be there, Do I believe heaven is real? No. But
what do you believe now? I know we kind of ended there. Or
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess we can get to it. Yeah, that's a good point.
Sorry, let's.
No. That's great. That's a great way to wrap this up. Yeah. I think we're about to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm about as atheist as you can reasonably get, as you can realistically get.
Okay.
Is there any way to prove whether or not there's a God behind the curtain of what we can see? No. That would be called deism. This idea that God is behind the curtain, doesn't really interact, doesn't really have an involvement, just kind of created it, is the magic kickoff,
Mm-hmm. Which, from my understanding, is what the founding fathers actually believed, or a majority of them.
Yes, absolutely,
right,
absolutely.
Far less.
The radical Christians, and that I come from, which also are a part of the Christian national movement now, which we'll talk about too, in later podcasts. Christian nationalist movement.
Yeah,
my church is a big part of that. Like the church that I came from is a big part of that.
Cult of personality.
They're the people. They're the people that were in Trump's White House praying over him. His pastor for the last term was one of the pastors that was in the circles that that my church idolized, that I idolized growing up, and all those people that are around him. Those are people who I've seen face to face.
Yeah,
that were in the church that I grew up in. So this is kind of crazy to see that. So the. Where I'm at now is no, I do not believe in the Christian God. I do not believe in any of the religions that man has come up with. Man has come up with so many religions, and they're all as fake as the other. Obviously, some of them have some helpful things. Some of them have some wisdom, because that was their way of conveying those wisdoms and the things that people have learned at those times. Mm-hmm. But to hold on to them now with what we know, where we've come, the world of science and discovery and proving what you say is true, actually proving what you say is true and putting it to the test, just easily dispels any of those ideas that there's some big magic God in the sky, A, or B, that there's some big magic God in the sky that listens to your thoughts, cares who you have sex with, or what you're doing, or has a say in which parking spot you get, or can he heal cancer, or heal children who are dying and stuff like that. obviously has been shown to be not true, just absolutely not true. Even the miracles that they get passed around in the churches that I grew up in, all those stories, you can never track down the origin.
Oh yeah,
ever.
Apocryphal.
Nobody ever saw it. Nobody ever actually saw it with their own two eyes. It was, if they saw something, it was something that can easily be explained by, a hysteria of the brain. It really wasn't a powerful thing to begin with, nobody's foot actually really regrew in front of somebody from a nub. Nobody actually had, their eyesight restored in some significant way. And they've shown that even those people...
It all just happened before cell phone cameras.
Right, right. All these miracles happened
Micah.
in Jesus' time before we could record what was actually happening. Yeah. So, I don't believe in any of that, of course. Yeah. And I went really hard into realism and naturalism, and that it's very hard. And this is where I have some sympathy for believers and people who believe in religions.
Yeah.
Because reality is really hard to grapple with our human brains. Mm-hmm. It's extremely unforgiving. It's a capricious place. Does not care if you live or die. Does not have a good or bad idea of good or bad. It is violent, in a sense that we would define violence. It is cold, empty of something beyond. And it is, and it's really hard to cope with. Yeah. There's a lot of void there.
Yes.
And
yeah,
that is scary.
Very scary.
It's very scary.
So
it's
scary.
Very scary. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing where if you're not brave enough for that, and it takes bravery, it takes some real bravery to look that in the face and go, I'm going to keep on doing it anyway, which I think is what is necessary. To be a real, if you want to say that you're you're operating in reality, you have to face that.
Right.
This is why I say, Christianity, or the Christianity that I came from, is so infantilizing. It literally says you're not brave enough, you're not strong enough to face these hardships. Let us just give you this fun fantasy answer, right, which actually does a lot of harm and will suck the life out of you very eventually. Stunting. And we'll talk about that too. We'll talk about that. It's very stunting. I remember that feeling. I remember feeling like I feel like my life is being stunted, like my intellectual life, my ability to grow and gain skills.
I felt like I was pressing up against the ceiling for sure.
Yeah. And I hated that feeling. I've hated that. When I read that book, The God Delusion, I was like, oh my God, the ceiling's open.
Yeah.
Now
100%.
I can run at a full sprint and not be held back the whole time and told it's evil that I have a brain that wants to think and wants to process and wants to understand the world and wants to learn new things and have new experiences and really see what can be actually exciting about being alive.
For sure. For me, it was the book Sapiens. I think I've told you about
Sapiens is a great one. It's a great one.
It's very, one of the most spiritual, just reading the way he...
make sure you're on the microphone.
The way that he... just like maps out like the age of the universe, all that. Like I just like felt the immenseness, which once again is scary.
Yeah.
But felt in a way I never had. And so, I think maybe this is a good place to stop. And like next, when we continue our combo, I think talking through how we went through a little bit more. I know we've touched like the deconstruction process,
right?
But then the way that we've...
Let's really get into that process. That sounds great.
Yeah. And then I think we'll see how the combo goes, but maybe get into reconstruction too, of like this idea of like rebuild.
Yeah, which I was about to talk about.
It's
that.
a lifetime process.
It's a lifetime process
sure.
because I will say this before going and to wrap it up, that I could not live in a raw, all filters off reality world. I don't think our brains are evolved to really handle that all day, every day. You have to put some filters back on, but the filters that you put back on, in my opinion, should be your own.
Yes.
And they should be ones that you believe to be right, and that ones that that can coincide with the reality of the world.
Yes.
But also help you have, a functioning brain within it.
Yeah. No,
because
I'd say
it's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard because it can get you down, going down the nihilism road is really difficult.
It is.
And we can get beyond that. And I know that some of the filters that I put on are more tools to help me navigate reality positively.
Yeah.
And without this capriciousness of the way the universe is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I agree with that full-heartedly. Yeah. Just that idea of, because I still am like very interested in spirituality. Which
and I call that spirituality.
Right. But I love learning of and hearing people that I'm connecting with now in my life that explain to me their experience, not with religion, sometimes it's religion, but with spirituality that just feels so much more like self-directed, self-involved in a way that that is something I'm trying to develop, because I agree. Like,
it makes you want to go for
it.
Because I consider the religion to be like training wheels. It's like riding a tricycle with training wheels.
Right. And my experience of it, I felt that it disconnected me.
Whatever. It's like having training wheels.
We're not bike experts.
Yeah, there you go.
We're not talking about bikes.
This is not George, the bike specialist podcast, all right?
But no, I feel like for me, the things that didn't work for me about religion is it disconnected me from myself and my spirituality.
Yeah.
And I am a quote unquote humanist as a word, right? Okay. The idea that I have a lot of faith in individual people. Like I know there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going, a lot of people make mistakes, but I believe really full-heartedly in like individual ability to move towards self-actualization. And I think, you just need that support, that space. Shout out to therapy. That's what I think it's for.
Therapy, let's go.
Hey, is just identifying those self-identified things that you truly connect with that help you. Because I do think you're actually absolutely right. Like, we do need like filters. We need our own kind of, I don't know if dogma would be the word, but like approaches to our life.
Approaches to life,
that I just think we can be a lot more involved in developing. And sometimes we have to unlearn a lot. Like that's like what I feel like I'm still doing.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that deconstruction, because there was a lot. It was a long process.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. And I still have things surprise me about it.
Oh, 100%. There's so many things. Yeah. I want to get into that.
It's
the
really,
things that stick that you
don't even realize.
Into.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We got to get into it.
But once you do get out of that, I have never felt more free.
Nope.
I've never felt more myself.
Yeah.
I've never felt more satisfied in my own skin.
Yeah.
And alive.
Yep.
And there's this Micah that growing up was so just Micah, and I get to be that now. I get to honor that and be that. And having gone through that process of trying to empty myself out to be something I'm not, and to be a shell of myself, and to be this dated Bronze Age ideal of what a human should be, and denying myself any autonomy or any self-actualization, getting to go for, it's just so, it's the part that it makes me a little angry, because so much of that time I feel was taken from me, and so much of that time that I could have been developing and being a human and being in my skin and living my life, living a real life. Because that's the other thing that Christianity does, is it says you you can't live a real life in this world. You're not of this world.
Yeah.
You are an alien in this world, so you can't really live a real life in this world.
This is a test.
Yeah, and so none of this is real.
Yeah.
That's the illusion that it gives you. Like, none of this, you're just kind of here. So don't, and that part, I think, is what steals the life from you. It's so sinister.
That was a big piece for me. I know we're wrapping up, but
I
did have... well,
this is a good point to end, I think.
As I was like kind of tapering in my journey, like heading towards like fully like leaving the church, I was having a conversation with someone. I guess I feel a need to protect this person from this.
I'm trying not to name names because I know that people listening to this will know exactly who I'm talking about, and I don't need names to confirm. First of all, and then second of all, like it's like not for that. I'm not here to call. I'm not here to have someone targeted on the internet. Yeah, exactly.
We're not taking names. No, but I had somebody mention to me, it was around like the George Floyd, like Black Lives Matter, something I was very passionate about, very interested in.
Yeah.
And somebody made a comment to me of like, and they were like, it was somebody who was conservative. They were, in the church. They were trying to be mindful, but they made a comment to me of like, well, I just know that Black people are going to be so blessed in the next life. And I was still like, quote unquote, in the church. I like full stopped. I was like, that is such a damaging perspective. Yeah. Like that just gives us free will. Like I've heard people say similar things.
Oppress people
about the Native Americans.
Levels. Like, and be okay with it.
Right. It's manifest destiny. It's this idea that like, because there's this other life.
This is a big point for me.
Yeah, I remember that being like one of the final like I really don't see the world
that
the same
religion
way.
makes it okay for people to think that way.
Yeah,
it's terrible. It's absolutely destructive and sinister.
Yeah.
All right, and that's my word, sinister.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Well,
all right.
On a point of hope, of hope, we have gotten past all of these sinister, dark places in our lives. And we hope that you are too, or are on your journey to it, or maybe are discovering it, and that's okay.
Dipping your toe.
That's what we're about, baby.
Thinking,
yes, let's learn, let's grow, let's do good things, let's have a good time too. I mean,
100%.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm very happy to be doing this with you, George.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Great combo. Thank you for sharing so much. I know we talked about some of those things, but it was really nice to hear just like your full start to finish story. And I think like,
well, it feels good to talk about them too. Yeah. Sometimes you need to like, to get it out there in a way and like help flesh it out with somebody. Cause I think that's one thing that we're doing here is that we're both taking our experiences and putting them on the table and going, help me understand this better.
Right. Yeah. we'll probably be like telling it over and over and trying to. I think one thing that like stands out to me and just maybe like an ending point is just like the thoughtfulness of your experience and like, because I think it's something that I was taught as a perspective as a Mormon, like whenever somebody left the church, it was very like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, they don't know this energy.
And they would say that about me because they don't, because that's just a scapegoat.
Right. It's an assumed thoughtlessness around all of this. And like, I remember like
they just want to go sin.
Yeah. Pretty quick after we left the church there, his name is Russell M. Nelson. He's the current prophet for the church. He's still kicking.
Yeah.
He gave this talks calling everyone that leaves the church lazy learners. And it's such bullshit because I'm like, the most study I did, I know for my wife too, like the most study we did is when not that we were like going out and like we want people to disprove, but we want to know, just like you said. And I just think it's so important that perspective is shared because there are a lot of good meaning people that try to learn and just decide that religion is not true. Right. And I just think that's something that I was never told was real growing up, and it is. And I just, I appreciate you sharing your story.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks. We're going to get into that next time. Let's get into that next time. All right.
All right.
That's it for I Lost My Faith. But all I got with this was this podcast. I could say it right. I'm going to get it right. I lost my faith, and all I got was this podcast.
Yes.
Episode 2, Micah's journey. We'll be back next week with kind of our deconstruction journey and kind of our journey since then and learning and growing. Yeah.
For sure.
All right. See you next time.
Keep going.
All right.